All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Anderson, and I am joined today by Robbie Church. Robbie has served as the Duke women's soccer head coach from 2001 to 2024. That is 24 seasons. He transformed the program into a national powerhouse with 4 NCAA College Cup appearances and 3 ACC regular season titles. Over his 39-year collegiate coaching career, he has amassed nearly 500 wins and was named ACC Coach of the Year 3 times and helped launch numerous players into professional and international soccer careers. He concluded his final season at Duke with a record-breaking campaign and earning the program's first ever #1 overall NCAA tournament seed. As many of you know, I played soccer for the very first women's soccer team at Duke, but I was not coached by Robbie. He has done an amazing job of continuing to build our alumni network of former players, and many of us came back to campus this past year to help celebrate his retirement. So thank you, Robbie, for joining and giving us some insight into your career, Duke women's soccer, and soccer recruiting in general. So
Great.
thank you.
No, thanks for having me, Katie. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Great. Okay, so we'll start with a couple of more personal background questions. The
Okay.
first one is, tell us about your experience that led you to want to become a college soccer coach.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, like most college kids, you don't start thinking about it. Well, I think right now people start thinking about it a little bit earlier, but until your kind of junior year, senior year, I started to think about I played college soccer at 2 places in North Carolina. I played at Appalachian State, coming out of high school from Atlanta, and then I ended up playing in a Division II school called Pfeiffer College, in Big Meisenheimer, North Carolina. But I really enjoyed that experience. And in between my junior and senior year, it's kind of an interesting story. So they have these national coaching schools that are around the country. It's set up by United States Soccer Federation, and they're licensed schools. They're CBA, and you start. So I enrolled in one, and it was at Columbia, South Carolina. And it was in the middle of June, and it was right before my senior year started. And to be honest with you, I really thought it was a soccer camp. I didn't know it was a coaching school. So I show up because I had actually got injured and I needed some play. I needed some places to play. I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, so there wasn't a lot there in the summer. And I needed some places to play as I went back. And I said, "Oh, here's a week coaching school, soccer, which I thought was a camp, actually coaching school. Let me go do this." So I ended up showing up and I got paired with a gentleman named Frank Kohlenstein, who's been a huge mentor of mine all the way through. And so Frank and I were going to our first session, and Frank shows up at the door with flip-flops on and notebooks and pencils in hand. And I show up at the door with cleats in my hand, ball under my arm, and he looks at me like this is a classroom session. I said, "A classroom session? What are you talking about? How come I get better if I get class?" And he said, "No, this is, and he explained what the coaching license was. I was like, "Oh, okay. So let's go." So I put my ball up, my cleats up, grabbed my notebook. I did have a notebook and a pen, and took off with that. And so it was field sessions and classroom sessions, and it was a week of that. And obviously that got me really interested in, okay, what am I going to do when I graduate? I didn't want a real job. I didn't want to, go out and get a suit or sit in a cubicle, or, I still only have one suit and one tie, which I'm really proud of. And so I went to school, and then about a month later, after we were finished, Frank called me and said, "Hey, I know after you play, and he knew I wanted to try out for the Carolina Lightning, which was a professional team in Charlotte. He said, if, however that goes, if it doesn't go the way you want it to, we would have an opening as an assistant coach here." And this was obviously on the men's side. So I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I do want to try out." So went senior year, spring of my senior year. I went and tried out with the Carolina Lightning, made a couple cuts, but then finally got released. And at that point, I got back to Frank and was like, "Is that offer still, available?" So graduated in May. And then that was at the University of South Carolina at that point called Spartanburg. It's actually University of South Carolina, upstate now. So went right down the road to USC Spartanburg and started coaching on the men's side. Spent a year there with Frank, and then, I probably made somewhat I look into as a really good decision. Sometimes I look as a bad decision. I did not stay with Frank. I should have stayed longer under his mentorship. But I took a job at East Carolina University in August, the second year out of August. And so they were going to start. I took the job at August 2nd, I think, and the season was going to start at August 15th. I made $1,500 a year was my salary. I flipped pizzas on the Greenville Boulevard at night, and I was a head men's soccer coach. My office was a broom closet, was a janitor's closet in Minchie's Coliseum that they just kind of turned in, I think, for me for an office. Our soccer field overlooked a big football stadium, and they park cars every Saturday for football games. They park cars on it. Every Sunday morning before we had game, we had to go pick up the glass bottles and all the glass on the field. So stayed there 2 years, and then I went back to Duke. Joined John Rennie's staff. Got to go back with the great John Rennie there, and I stayed for 2 years at Duke, and then I got an opportunity to go to a really great place called Belmont Abbey College outside of Charlotte, and went there for 5 seasons. And then it was funny when I left Duke. Bill Hempen came in and took my place, who was your coach. So
Yep.
Bill came in and took my place, and then when Bill left Duke, he actually called me. I was at Vanderbilt on the women's side at that point, and Bill said, "Hey, why don't we complete this circle? Would you be interested in coming back?" Which we actually love Vanderbilt. We love the Nashville area. We live in a great little town called Franklin, Tennessee. But I'm from Greensboro. My wife's family's from High Point, and it gave us a chance to kind of come back home and obviously come back to Duke.
Okay. So is that how Ronnie Kovalevsky
That
ordered
is how
and ended up
that
at
that
Vanderbilt? Okay.
that a little bit, yes, is how Ronnie ended up at Vanderbilt. When I left, I called her and said, "Hey, I'm coming back to Duke." She was at College of Charleston, and I said, but I did coach when I was at Belmont Abbey. I coached Ronnie, a bunch of Eric Valder, Woody Gibson, a lot of guys got me on the ODP side on women's. That was the first time, even though I was coaching the men. And I did start working in the North Carolina ODP system, and that's when I met Ronnie and a lot of players that were coming up. And the first time I got a chance to coach on the women's side, so I've known Ronnie a long time. And actually, Ronnie was my assistant for a long time at UNC Charlotte. I did go to UNC Charlotte that was on the women's side, and then Vanderbilt, and then back to Duke, my first
Wow.
job.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, I
So it
know
was
Ronnie sees you as her, one of her primary mentors too. So
Yeah,
that's
no, she's a
amazing.
good she's a good friend. She has always been a good friend.
Great. Well, so another question for sort of just on the personal side,
Yeah,
I always think about when I think about the fact that now I'm through the phase of my life where I've raised my family and had to
yeah,
work and balance all of those needs. But what
yeah,
does it feel like for you to
yeah,
you have children?
yeah,
You've moved around a lot. Like, what
yeah,
is it like to
yeah.
balance your coaching profession and your personal life during all this?
Yeah, looking back at it now, you're like, oh my God. Well, number one, thank God I had a fantastic and a great wife, and still have 41 years of Linda, because there was a lot of years in there. We had 8 different stops. We never stayed anywhere longer than 5 years until we came to Duke. And so we were a lot of boxes, a lot of moving, and a lot of, climbing up the coaching ladder a little bit. But it was hard. It was hard. I don't think I was a good dad, in the early stages, because we were so much on and at that point, it wasn't like Duke. I could jump on an airplane. I had to jump in a car, I had to travel, and I had to travel through the night, and I had to, spend the night some days in we had an Astro van, and we would take out the back seats, and I would sleep in the back of the van a little bit. And some days, some trips, I took my daughter or my son with me on those trips and put all their toys in the back of the van, and they would go with me too. So, we tried as best we could and made it happen. But again, I think it was hard, especially those years balancing. And by the time I got to Duke, it was great because again, my son's a big basketball player and was a basketball player at that point. And all I needed when I got to Duke for in his eyes was have the key to Cameron. Because we used to go shoot basketball almost at least 3 or 4 nights a week around 9 o'clock when everybody was out of Cameron. And we would go shoot. He was a high school basketball player in the city of Durham and then walked on at UNC Charlotte.
Okay.
Um, and so I was dad of the year when I could get in Cameron. So I did make up for it later in life. And our daughter, we have a big athletic family. My daughter played 4 years of college soccer at UNC Wilmington. She played for Paul Carney at UNC Wilmington and was a really as good level for her and did well down at Wilmington.
Fabulous. I love it. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and
Okay,
talk about sort of leadership, team culture,
sure,
you know,
sure.
mental and physical health, because that's been the kind of a
Yep,
focus for a while now.
yep,
So first, let's just talk about like looking back on your 24 seasons at Duke. Um,
yep.
what moments or accomplishments stand out as the most meaningful to you on or off the field? Do you have any particular memories you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think off the field, I mean, 24 years of making relationships with unbelievable young ladies that will change the world. And some of them are out there changing the world. Some of them they're just really, really special people. And what I thought was really special for me is not only did I have them for 4 years and we could see the changes in them as young ladies growing up, but also, I really enjoyed what they did when they finished Duke and what were the things they went into. And as you know, the spectrum of areas that athletes come out of Duke, and especially in the early days because there wasn't professional soccer. There wasn't any chance to play. It was really, really hard to play. You had to really put effort and time to play either, domestically or internationally. It was very, very difficult up to about 10 years ago for the women game to play after college. So I think the relationships and being able to stay in touch with the players and being able to see them grow as young ladies when they come in and then when they leave, and then once they leave, the jobs that they take and the things they do and the families they have. They're just really, really amazing, amazing people. And so I have the privilege to see that and be part of that and maybe play a little bit of a small part, in their growth and stuff too. So it was really, really rewarding. I think that was the thing. And the other thing is we had a great staff through the years. I had Billy Lassay was with me for 14 years. You know, Irwin was with me for 5 years. Kieran, who took the head coach now, was with me, for 7 years, I think, with it. And then, of course, Carla has been there the whole time, and is it's the one who keeps everything together and makes everything happen. Is Carla Overbeck, who is just a unbelievable, wonderful person. And so it was the relationships, and we had a bunch of different goalkeeper coaches that were great because at that time you could only have two. So a lot of the goalkeepers were volunteers, and we found different jobs and different things that were fantastic, and they all did a great job. So it was just, I felt I was so lucky to get out of bed. I enjoyed getting out of bed every single day. I enjoyed going to Duke. I enjoyed interacting with our staff. I enjoyed interacting with our players. I enjoyed interacting with the athletic staff there so much. And I did that in all other places too. At UNC Charlotte, I did that at Vanderbilt. I did that on the men's side. I just, I feel really lucky to be a coach. I feel like I was a coach the whole time. I was, there was a period of time that I thought maybe I would get out of soccer and I looked at different options. but I never did. We moved from Boca Raton, Florida, from what was College of Boca Raton, Lynn University, now back to Charlotte. And I did teach at Charlotte Country Day School, which actually was a great experience. And that's actually when I started coaching the women's side. Because in the fall, I would coach the boys in North Carolina, and then in the spring, I would coach the girls. And that's right before I took the job at UNC Charlotte on the women's side. So just kind of really blessed with those relationships. And then, obviously things that stick out is, getting to Final Fours, playing in national championships, just seeing how excited everybody is to play in a College Cup. I really wanted, I think we missed a couple of classes, but I really wanted each of our players to have that opportunity, especially, to play in a College Cup because it's an unbelievable experience. It's something that you will never forget. It's something, you're going to forget the scores of some of the games and you're going to forget different things, but you're not going to forget what it's like to play in. So getting the College Cups, winning in a couple of games, getting the national finals. We never won the finals, but I'm sure Kieran and Carla are gonna do that. But it's going through that process. It's going through that journey and spending time in those really special moments and journeys. And then I was very proud of how consistent we have been over the last 15 to 20 years. I wanted to make sure our program wasn't a flash in the pan, that we were in the Final Four and then we're not to be seen on a national level until 5 or 6 or 7 years later. We did have I think we had 8, 10, 11 Final Eights in the country too. So we were a very consistent program. We were always in the things of playing for national championships.
Yeah. Well, I tell kids all the time the story of when our program first started, and we
Yeah,
went from non-existent to
yeah,
number 2 in the country in 5 years.
I know. It's
And that's
amazing.
how fast this program ramped up. And,
Yeah.
I just think it's amazing that ever since that first 5-year period, you guys have, both you, and Bill Hempen,
Yeah.
have kept this program at a really consistently high level, it's really impressive.
Yeah,
So
no question. And it will continue to be there with Kieran and Carla. They will do an outstanding job and already doing an outstanding job.
awesome. Okay. Well, and that kind of, I guess, transitions a little bit into how did your approach to coaching evolve over the years of coaching especially the women's game.
Yeah.
I'll just ask a couple of questions here, but again, just to probe that a little bit more. What do you think defines the culture of Duke women's soccer, and how did you work to build and protect that over 2 decades?
Yeah.
And I remember back when I think it was probably more than 10 years ago now, when we came back for an alumni event, and you were talking about how you were having issues with kids. The team was injured. A lot of players were injured, and you were trying to address that. So you put in I think it was called Fit for 90
Yeah.
program to try to address injury prevention and mental health. And that was
Yeah.
before mental health even became a topic that people really talked about very
Right.
openly. So I wonder if you could kind of address some of those questions.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. How long do we have? They can be here for a while on some of those.
We can talk as long as you want.
I think, how did the coaching evolve? I think it evolved in such a really positive way. I mean, I think, as coming out as a coach early in my career, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I coach. That's how I coach. But you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And there's been so much growth in the coaching area, how to coach, the philosophy of coaching, the mental health, the illnesses over the years. So I think it became a little bit. I do think, early on in your career, you're like, okay, I really want to do well. I want to, always motivate me. I don't know if this is the best way to be motivated, but for me, I was always motivated. I had the fear of failing. I had the fear. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to not succeed. And, there were some tough times the first few years when we were there at Duke. Didn't make the NCAA tournament the second year, did get squeezed in on the third year. So it took a little while before we kind of turned it back around and got it. But it was just sometimes. So, I think once I got away from that, of coaching not to fail, once I got more once you start to learn a little bit and you start to mature some, and once you go, it was always about the athlete, but just learning more about the athlete, becoming more, more athletically, centered for the athlete, and more relationship based, and more. I think maturity kicks in there as, sitting down, listening to the student athlete, looking what their needs are. What are their individual needs? You have this group of 30 players, let's say 25 to 30. What is their individual needs? Because everybody has different individual needs. Why are they playing? What is their goal? Who, they're playing for a team, or they playing to be successful, or they playing for their parents, or they playing friends. There's so many things. So I think taking a little bit more time and just not thinking that, oh, I can make this all happen myself, or our staff, or everything we do on the field. It's a lot more things off the field. And I think that leads into the culture. And then, it became very important. There was a time in, I think, the 05 to 010, culture became a very, very important thing. The culture of a team, and then continue to grow at that point. The culture of the team, and diving into the culture of the team, and diving into kind of what standards are, what does standards look like, and what are, but still also understanding the individual needs too, for the individual players, and not only the 10 needs. And you have to be hard and fast sometimes, but you have to also be flexible. So I think, having a little bit more flexibility as I got older, I think that really helped. Learning that, hey, you can coach, because you used to coach almost like a basketball coach at that early to, you were in their face, you were hard, you were and that really wasn't my personality, but I thought that's how you coach. And then you start to realize there's different ways you can coach. You can be somebody that can, talk to your players. You can be without them. You're always scared. Well, are they going to find you soft, or players going to run over you, or you do that? But you can be somebody. So, and then we started winning and going to Final Fours and Final Eights, and that built up credibility and stuff too. So I think as it got older, kind of setting the culture and really protecting the culture of our program. And I think the best way of that is recruiting. How do you protect the culture of your program and the players you bring in? I always have a lot of players say and different things is, we always brought a really good quality player kid in, and that was the main thing. First of all, you've got to bring a good person in. You've got to, and that person has to align with what is your philosophy and what is the culture of your team, and is it important for them. We have turned away a number of good players. I mean, if I tell you the names of them, which I won't, it was like, wow, these, and they have been very successful in college. They have been very successful in the women in professional soccer, and they've been very successful on the national team. But something talked to me a lot about they just were not a good fit for us at Duke. And they went in schools and they beat us a couple times and did some things, but it was just not, and I think that goes back to recruiting. And I did for a long, long time. I still, even at the end, I love to do. I really did most of the recruiting, and it was important that I saw that player a number of times, and I saw that player in different environments. I would show up at high school games, and nobody goes to high school game, as much. Because you get a bigger bang, not because of the high school level, but you just get a bigger bang for your buck, on the tournaments that you go to. So I would show up at high school games. I would show up at trainings. I would show up, and you look for things. You just, how does a person react to a bad call against them? How does a person react when their team's losing 4 or 5-0? I would love it when their teams are down, 2, 3, 4 goals. How do they react with that point? How do they speak to their teammates? How do they speak to their parents? How do they speak? Do they even carry their bag? I would cringe if I saw a player's parents carrying their bag off the field. That is the, and that is your equipment. That is your stuff. That's not your parents and, the boyfriend or anybody carrying the bag with them, with that point. So I think going back, building that culture of that team and keeping the culture of team really goes back to finding the right match with your player in your program. And and everybody's got things they look for, and everybody, but for us, it was always finding a really good person. And if we found a really good person, and of course, playing the ACC, you had to have a certain level. You had to technically be really, really good. You had to athletically be really, really good. And that's kind of when we took our step forward, when we kind of were able to combine those, is making sure that, because we had a style. This is how we wanted to recruit, to a style of play. And once we kind of figured out what our style was, and what we looked in the individual players, but never left the thing about the culture piece, and the player piece was the number one thing for us.
All right. So this brings up a couple of questions for me. And you weren't there when Carla was hired initially, but
No, no.
you inherited Carla as the
Yeah,
assistant
yeah.
coach.
Thank goodness I did. I kept
But I'm
her.
sure you know the story. So, and I
Yeah,
don't know the story. So, what kind of impact did she bring to what was an all male coaching staff at the
yeah,
time,
yeah.
to being the first woman? I don't know how many other women assistant coaches you've had over the years, but how much did just Carla as a woman, and obviously being the icon that she is in the soccer
For sure.
world,
For sure.
to your program and the culture?
For sure. I mean, she is, Carla is, she's really Duke soccer. I mean, she's been there for so long, and over Bill and myself, with it too. And there was periods when we were there that she was not as much involved in Duke soccer as she is now, or was before, because of her children. She was a great, great mother, and she was very important to her that she, was going to be to raise her children and be it her children. They were both soccer players, volleyball players, basketball players, and wanted to be at their athletic events and do things. So there was a good time period, 10 years or so, that we kind of, she did a lot of things with us, but there's a lot of things she missed because of her family, and that's just the person. But whenever she was with us, she was always just so gun-ho, so much energy, so positive energy, so outgoing, and so humble. I mean, there's just nobody else it's done what she's done. She's one of the greatest women soccer players of all time, and she's so humble about it. But she's also one of the greatest people of all time, and that combination of that just makes it. And it goes back. If you read and see about the 99ers, and you see anything with Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy and the whole group, they credit Carla for so much, because she was their leader. She was the backbone. She was their voice. She's not afraid to say things. She's not afraid to ruffle feathers if they need to be ruffled. She always put her arm around you. But yeah, she's been so important. And I think I can speak for Bill here in this situation, for Bill and for us, and I think I can speak for Kieran too, that it was important as we made this transition, is that she is now associate head coach, and she is very much attached with Kieran, and they make a great, great partnership.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, I was really excited to see when you announced who the coaching staff would be going on after your retirement. That was amazing. Well, and the other question that sort of popped in my head as you were talking about all of the things that you have learned along the way, how much your coaching style has changed once you let go of the, not fearing
Yep.
failure. Um,
Yeah.
how much of that was even taught in your coaching license classes?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think a lot was taught, and it may not have been just a session on that, but as you take the license, and as get to talk with soccer with other coaches, and you get to talk, you just could see that was part of it, and I think a lot of it then you became knowledge. How much did you learn? How much did you grow? How much are you? And with knowledge becomes confident. And then you become more confident at that point too, and then you're not as worried as you were earlier, about, okay, fear. And I think a lot of that became the evolution of soccer. There's, as we know right now, I tell the ladies all the time in camps and clinics and things, we're in the golden age of women's soccer. I mean, you can turn it on television. You've got unbelievable, there's, Division One, there's Division Two, Division Three, junior colleges, Christian colleges, everything. There's the There's a place for everybody. And then the professional soccer now with obviously NWSL and the USL Super League here in States, and then so many options afterwards. We're in the golden age of women's soccer. And then, with the development of the game and more things coming out, in so many areas like injuries and mental illnesses and different things and development of all of this and develop like you refer to fit for 90, how to train players and how I'm going back to that is so there's no excuses anymore. They used to maybe I know I overtrain players and I know that's why they're all sitting on the sidelines hurt. I've tried to apologize to all of them. I feel like I need to write them an all and no overtraining players, especially early in our career. But there's no excuses anymore. There's a lot of information out there. You just have to open your eyes and open yourself to that information to become better. You have to continue to learn all the time, all the way through it. You have to, because it changes and it changes so fast. And I think with soccer being the world's game, it's probably the sport it changes the quickest because of everybody in the world trying to figure out how are better ways to do things. Is it how to make your team fitter? Is it how to make injury prevention? Is it from a tactical standpoint, from a technical standpoint? There's so much out there that you can learn and you can dive into, and I think that has helped everybody across the board.
Yeah. Oh, I would agree. In fact, I was really impressed when you talked about how, you needed to address this injury prevention issue because you cannot keep
Yeah.
just hammering on, and having half your
Yeah.
team injured. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I hired some, and I know the first time I hired some assistant coaches. I hired when Billy got the head job at University of Georgia and left us. It gave me an opportunity to kind of look around and see what was out there. I had a lot of my friends that were a little bit older like me wanting to come and work with them, and it'd been easy to hire them and say, "Yeah, it'd be great." But I knew there was so much out there, and I knew that there was a lot of things that were, a development and things were really opening up, and some of the stuff I didn't know about. And then the head coaching job was getting harder and harder. There was more things demanded from you off the field than almost on the field at that point was starting. And then you started to become a fundraiser. You started to have to do so many different things that it gave me an opportunity and to hire people that I wasn't overly didn't really know that well, but I felt would be just would open doors to running the program and changing the program. You've got and I'm reading a lot of Coach K stuff. Obviously, it's you've got to be open to change and you've got to be open to and sometimes that may come back and bite you a little bit, but more likely it doesn't. And Irwin had came in at that point, and Kieran continued with it too. They were just both of them were just engrossed in soccer and just were on the cutting edge of new areas and so when I knew our program needed to make a change and I knew we needed to go in a new modern direction. So it was refreshing that I was learning a lot during the same time that
Mhm.
we heard some people that really brought some different thoughts to both Carl and I and looked at it a different way. And it helped us grow as a program, as a team.
Yeah. Well, that's really inspiring to hear the open-mindedness around new skill sets and new, new ways of thinking. Because I totally agree with you. That's the only way. That's how innovation happens, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And I saw, unfortunately, sometimes I saw a bunch of my friends out there were older coaches not become successful, and then the bottom line lose a job because they were not willing to open that door or go new ways or different ways with different things. So, it wasn't easy, but it was just you got to sometimes take a leap of faith.
yeah, great. Just want to make I told you 45 minutes, but I have a lot more questions to ask. So are you good with
I'm good. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
No problem.
Okay, so next we're going to shift gears into recruiting, and this is really
Yep,
something that families who might be watching this
yep,
are going to be very interested to hear about. Um,
yep.
so just For context, Duke women's soccer obviously has been a top-ranked Division I program for many years, and a very highly academic institution. So the combination of those, I think, sets you up for a certain level of, type of player, right? So we get questions all the time as college counselors who specialize in athletic recruiting around academics, and I'll just put a particular scenario out there. So if a student athlete has a 4.0 unweighted GPA, but has never taken a single honors or AP or IB course in their curriculum, would that student athlete be academically competitive, or be able? If you went to admissions with that student athlete's transcript, would that be something that Duke admissions would be willing to consider?
Yeah.
Given that not many other students at Duke look like that on paper.
Yeah, no, it would have been tough. I kind of back up. So, yeah, I think you probably remember, Katie, you were working this area when they started talking about the recruiting process. We couldn't contact players till after their sophomore year, June 15th, after their sophomore year. Great rule, because we were recruiting ninth graders, and it was very interesting talking to a ninth grader. And at that point I was 50-some years old. I'm talking to a ninth grader, and I don't know how we talked about anything, but we did. It got to it. But what really hurt the negative and the downside of that rule was you couldn't get to that ninth grade and say, hey, you need to take these classes. These are important to you. You need to challenge yourself. What I always tell, and as a general rule, you never want anybody to say no to you. You never want you to say, hey, I'm sorry, we can't get you in Duke. You may not want to go to Duke, but we can't get you in Duke, or we can't get you in any school because you haven't taken the right courses, and you haven't taken the rigor is so important in a lot of schools. So I would suggest, and that's what I try to talk at camps and clinics and stuff, and really talked about, challenge yourself. Like you challenge yourself on, you want to play on the best team you possibly can. You want to play at the highest level. You want to do the same thing academically. All we want to do is close that academic gap between your academics and then a Duke thing, or just really doesn't have to be Duke, just a general college academics. And for you to close that gap, you want to, just like you want to play at the highest level. Do you want to play ECNL? You want to play GA? Do you want to play, all the different leagues are out there? You want to play at the highest level. So you want to close that gap. But challenge yourself. Take as many, we suggested, I think, and they're starting to give AP classes or B courses, earlier. Can you take one AP as a freshman? Man, schools are off the moon. Can you take one or two as a sophomore? And then when you get to junior and senior year, can you take a couple each semester? And that by the time you finish up, you may have 6 to 8 to 10 AP courses. And now you're typically, you're in the ballpark with anybody in the country.
Right.
You don't have to take all. Duke did not say you have to take all AP. No, you don't. If you take a couple would be great. Now, a lot of our players would take 3. Again, that's just the type of person they are. They wanted to challenge themselves in the classroom as much as they did on the field. So they would take 3 a semester. For us, you had to have 4 courses at least, or 5 courses at least, 5 academic courses to take, and they would take 3 and then take honors or, high honors or something in academic courses. So, to really answer your question, would missions look at it at that point? It's hard. If they would look at it, we would have some conversation with it. But it would be a very, very difficult journey. You're going to have to take 3 to 4 AP courses each semester, junior, senior year, which is, if you haven't taken any, which is a very difficult track to take from an academic. So rigor counts. Rigor is important. So challenge yourself in the classroom. And again, you know yourself academically, try to get as much feedback you can, because not everybody can, always handle all the AP courses too.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great to hear, because that is preaching to the choir
Yeah,
for me.
yeah,
The same
exactly.
sort of things that we always talk about. And, some kids can handle a rigorous, super rigorous course load. Other kids
Yep.
need to dial back a little bit, and other
Yep.
kids, that's
Yep.
just not where they are. And I say,
For sure.
we should
For sure.
make adjustments for the types of schools we're approaching based on
Yes.
the fact that not every school out there, I mean, the Ivies have
Yep.
a certain expectation, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so yeah, so I'm happy to hear you say that, confirm
Right.
that for us. Also, when it comes to, and this comes up a lot, extracurricular activities and
Yeah.
essays in the application
Yep.
process.
Yep.
Some people may be under the impression that you do I need to even fill out a college application? And the answer is yes. But I think athletes especially have, I hear a lot like I spend all my time on the soccer field and at school.
Yeah.
When am I supposed to volunteer? When am I supposed to get a job? When am I supposed to do these other join a club or do
Yep.
research or whatever else these other kids are doing, right? And so my question to you would be, and maybe this is Duke specific, or maybe you have some more general advice about those extracurriculars or the essays especially. How seriously does a school like Duke take that for a recruit, specifically for a recruited athlete?
No question. Very seriously. We've had a couple in the 20 some years that they have sent back the application to them and they said you need to do a better job on this. We know you're capable of doing a better job. We know you can. You just kind of blew through this and it's not up to our standards with it. And that would I made sure that I told them in the application that this is an important piece. This is something that we have to look at. They don't want, again, and I think this is Duke, but I also think it's for a number of schools. They want you to be serious. Now, I can't speak for all sports, but in women's soccer, they want you to make sure that you take this serious, and they don't want you to feel like, oh, I'm just going to get in because I'm an athlete. You've got to also earn your way in, and that's part of the SAT, and that's part. So I would highly recommend any of whatever, if it's one essay, two essays, whatever it is, you do the best job you possibly can. Get somebody to help you with the essay. Get somebody to read the essay because it is part of the whole process. The grammar, putting sentences together, being able to that. That's part of, okay, can a person do work in the classroom? And that university will demand, do. Because the last thing anybody wants is to bring a student in. Doesn't matter how good of a player she or he would be and they can't do the work academically. That leads to disaster. That leads to disaster on the field. That leads to disaster off the field. And so, it is very important that you do the things that they ask and not, well, I'm the best soccer player around and they'll get me in. We had a bunch of, and they were good players. A couple of them, they were good players. And then I had another one that was like, I'm going to let this person in, but I really, really, really wish they had done a better job. And I'd make sure they knew that, you need to do a better job. You need to do, but I think that's, we try to teach, it doesn't, it's in the classroom, it's on the soccer field. When you put the jersey on, when you write your name on the test, you got to do your best job. You got to do, that represents you. That represents women's soccer program. That represents the athletic department, is trying to do the best job that you possibly can.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Another question that comes up a lot with recruits is sort of what are the qualities, and we're talking physical, technical,
Yeah.
tactical, mental,
Yeah.
maturity, and you've touched on
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff already, or maybe some of the intangibles that move a player from being on your prospect list onto
Sure.
your short list of
Sure.
top recruits. And I love
Sure.
your example of did they carry their bag off the field?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no. I think a couple things I think is important. I think, I think if I can say anything, you have to take ownership of your recruitment. This is your recruitment. This isn't your parents' recruitment. This isn't your friends' recruitment. This is your recruitment. So don't sit back. There's a lot of great soccer players and there's a lot of great athletes in different sports in this country and especially schools like Duke that recruit from all over the country, so don't sit back and say, oh, I'm greatest thing since sliced bread and they're going to come find me and get me in there. No, we may find you but we may not find you. There's unfortunately, there's only a certain amount of times and tournaments and money out there to get around, so take advantage of recruitment. If we continue to see letters from people, that means a lot. We want somebody that wants every coach. We obviously wanted people that wanted to come to Duke, but I don't know a coach around that doesn't want somebody that really wants to be in their program. And if you start to recognize names and sometimes we can't get back to you because it's before June 15th. And players, oh, they're rude. They don't know the rules sometimes, and they're rude, and they're not getting back to us. We see those letters, and coaches see those letters, and we'll come look at you. You may not be the right fit, but we'll come look at you. But I think you need to take ownership in that too. And I do think that, so I think that's the number one thing. The other thing that's hard is each year is a different recruiting cycle. Okay. You had different needs in the program. Some years you have needs that you need a forward. Some years you need a midfielder. Some year you need a defender. Some year you need a goalkeeper. Some years you may not need a goalkeeper. Some year you may not need a forward. You have a bunch of those players. Now, you may be the best goalkeeper in the country, but I can't afford to spend a scholarship on you because I've already invested some financial money into these other players here. And this is again, things have changing quick and fast, with it as we go. But so yeah, I think you need to do a little research on the teams. Where's the needs of, and hopefully you can get in touch with a head coach or assistant coach and get a 10-minute conversation with them. And what are your needs? What are you looking for in the class of 2025 or 2026? Are you athleticism? Is it speed on the flanks? Is it a dribbling ability? What do you need, and do I match that? Again, we've passed up on some top players in the country that have been really, really good just because we didn't have a need in that type of player on that year. It's not that you're not a good player. It's not that you wouldn't have had a great career at Duke, and it wouldn't. And it's hard because some people, fall in love and that's your dream school. And you have to say, we're not interested just because, we have players in your position and
Right.
those things too. So I think that's important that you do your research and then, try the best you can. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard to figure out what are some of the needs of the recruiting class of that year. And does your skill set match up to what they're looking for?
Right. Well, and I remember this is sort of a side note, but there was a conversation I had with you many years ago around videos and
Yep. Yep.
review recruiting videos. And your comment to me was, I've been burned by video a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
I really appreciate everything you're saying around you as coach, as your coaching staff. And I've run into you multiple times at Surf Cup
Yeah.
and Oceanside and, watching players play in person, because it's not enough to just see, while video is a critical starting point,
For sure. For
right?
sure.
It's not, at the end of the day, you really, you've told me how important it is to see players in person, to watch all those other things about them, not just who they are on the field, attitude, all of that really is
Yeah.
very meaningful. So,
And I think maybe videos are probably coming in maybe even more than ever because of budget cuts and budget things and lack of travel and getting out and stuff too, that this is a good way to identify a player. I would never recruit off a video, yes or no. I would just like, okay, yeah, I'm interested. This shows me, and I would go find a player off a video and see for myself, which is, again, it's still dangerous because I may see the best 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes they've ever played, or I may see the worst 30, or I may see something in between. So unless you're able to see a player a number of times, a multiple time, number of times, it's really, really hard. And maybe that's where some ID camps come into play that you can get on their campus, you can visit, they can have number of sessions in front of the coaches that you can show and give the coaches kind of a better idea of where you stand.
how much follow-up do you actually do with club coaches? If you identify a player that you think you really like, you've
Yep.
seen
Yep.
the standard that you're happy with, right? How much
Yep.
follow-up do you do with the club coach to kind of probe a little further about some of those other qualities about a player that you may not have been able to see?
For sure. I think there's you have to because they work with that player every day in, day out. They know that player, the good of that player, they know the bad of that player. They know when they're really on. They know when they're really off. They know when things are not great. How do they respond? How do they respond to those things? So it is good. It's just and club coaches play a really, really big, important part. And you have to figure out with dealing with club coaches too, because there's some club coaches that are brutally honest, and will tell you really the truth. There's some club coaches that would love to have a player at Duke or have a player at the ACC or have a player at a number of different schools. And it's like, they really saying give us a whole picture, or are they giving, just something to put a feather in their cap a little bit that we have a player going to this school or get this conference or play in the ACC. So you have to establish relationships, and you have to understand club coaches. Are they going to shoot you straight, or are they going to be there to just try to get a kid in
Right.
your team? That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting hearing it from the coach's perspective and how all of that works. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for that. Do you have any examples of student athletes that you have recruited who maybe weren't, who were there for more of their leadership
Yeah.
than anything
Yeah.
else? Maybe they didn't get a lot of playing time.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
can you
Yeah.
share some stories or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a young lady, and I don't know if I mentioned name or not with it, but it's a
That's
good
okay.
story.
No,
Is it okay or not? Or
it's up to you. I would say
yeah,
let's not mention names. You
yeah,
could just
yeah.
go
That's what
ahead.
I thought.
Yeah.
So there was a young lady that played in the 2011 Final Four for us. She was a junior, senior, I think junior that year. We're going into her wedding next month. Um, but she had a couple of older sisters that went to Duke. They didn't play soccer, but she kept calling me, and at that point, and she kept writing me, and she kept calling, and I just didn't see it. I just didn't feel it. I didn't. And finally, I was like, okay, here we go. Just don't call me again. Don't send me a letter. Don't send this. I will take you. I will add you on the squad. I will give you an opportunity, I promise, but I want to give you an honest opinion of what I think. And darn, did she start from halfway through her freshman year all the way till her senior year, played in, I know, national championship game. And technically she wasn't great technical player, but she had the biggest heart of one of that we've ever had on the field. And she worked so, so hard. There were times we once said, so and so, we're in blue out here today. So pass it to blue people. But nobody played hard. Nobody competed hard. So, I mean, you just don't know. There's been many, many, many cases of it. And then, some of our best leaders over the years have been girls that have not been starters, or they've been girls that have not been, they actually play a lot. And they were some of our best leaders on the field. They were the most committed to the team, and they were leaders, and they basically had an attitude that, like, okay, I'm not going to play. You're going to play. If you play in front of me, you're going to play hard, and you're going to compete, and you're going to play hard. And I'm going to make sure you're playing hard and you're competitive and you're competing if you're playing in front of me. So, there's many, many different ways, and it's not an exact science, but I go back to where, as coaches, we love to maybe cut them open and see a heart, the size of their hearts. But we've had many good players too. It's unfortunately been on the other side. Technically, they were great. Technically, they were great players and they were good, but they just wasn't competitive. They didn't play hard. They didn't compete. And when you get into playing Carolina and you get in playing Florida State and Virginia and all the team, Wake and everybody in our league, you have to have a sense of competitiveness. You got to play hard, and then you've got to be able to move on too. We're all going to make mistakes, and I got to be able to move on to the next play right away. So
Right. A memory of a goldfish.
yeah, I was just about ready to say that. I was like, oh my
I'm
God,
rewatching Ted Lasso right now, so
I know. So that came to mind. Yeah, exactly. The memory of a goldfish. Be a goldfish.
a
And
goldfish.
it's absolutely a great analogy and it's great. It's a great forever for a lot of things in life. You need to be a goldfish.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Um, okay, so we talked a little bit about videos, but
Yeah.
in terms of student athletes sending you video highlights, just some details around that. Do you turn off the music when and can send you high. I tell kids to just forget the music. Coaches would rather hear what's going on the field. Prefer
Yeah,
not to hear what's happening in the stands if a
yeah,
parent is the one
for
doing it,
sure, for
right?
sure.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to videos, do you like, is 5 minutes a good amount? Do you often ask for full game or all touch videos, or what does that look like?
I think 5 minutes was a good, there have been times we've asked for full games, but not typically 5 minutes. The music, especially, I'm probably not a fan of the music they like as I got older with it too. Kenny Chesney never popped up on many videos out there. So, a lot of times I was a fan, but, that's okay. Because, I mean, you can always turn it down. You can always turn it off. You can always turn it down, but probably overall, it's not the greatest of ideas to have the music with it too. Maybe the assistant coaches like to listen to the music that they have on things, but I think 5 minutes highlights and just show. I mean, we understand. Okay, everything on a video is going to be a plus. It's going to be a positive. There's going to be things too. It's almost like, okay, what happens if you lose a ball? How do you react when you lose a ball? Do you track back? Do you defend? One of the hardest things for the fresh joining from a incoming freshman to getting on they always ask, well, how can I get on the field? How can I play my first year? How can I? Well, when we don't have the ball, are you a defender? Are you going to work whatever if you're a forward? And most of young players haven't ever been asked to do work, especially defensively. They haven't really been asked at that point, and especially really, really good players. And that becomes such a culture shock when they get to college because now, if I'm especially a forward, you find those forwards that they don't really want to defend a lot, but it's important that they defend and they win balls up high. There's a lot of pressing these days and a lot of winning balls up in the final third of the back third of the defensive team. So, that's important too. So, but you could see some of those things. But I do think, quality videos, put some time into it, put them out. You don't have to go. Some of them are just kind of crazy. They're just so, well, but don't spend a fortune on them, but just make them quality. I have had some people dribbling around dumpsters and playing off, kicking against dumpsters and doing other things in parking lots and the back things. So there's been a lot of different videos over the years, but I would say put in some time, make it quality, make it as professional as you can, and don't go too long with it. Also, well, all you're doing in most cases, now there will be other coaches that would like to have full games, but in the most cases, you're sparking interest. Do
Right.
I spark interest in a coach? Will this spark interest that I want to go find this player? And the main thing is making sure the coach knows where you're playing, what tournament, what fields. Coaches are pretty lazy. They want to know all the information, what time, what field, but has your video sparked enough interest to get the coach to come out and watch the
Right.
game?
Now, when you were doing recruiting, and again, I mentioned I had seen you at Surf Cup.
Yeah.
Were you primarily looking at Girls Academy and ECNL girls for recruiting, or did you ever go off that, stray from
Yeah.
that
I
plan?
mean, we it would be primary, I would say, on those two for sure. But we did stray a little bit. Like I said earlier, high school games we've gone, sometimes people can't play club because they're sometimes they're a three-sport athlete. They play soccer, they play basketball, they're doing something else in the spring. Which and you won't typically to play as much as possible, but also I think sometimes you can play too much and you become a better athlete by playing more sports and other sports out there. I know soccer people are very engulfing and they want to put hands on and they don't want you to do anything else a lot. Sorry about that, club coaches out there if you with it, but it's I think it's good that sometimes they do other sports. Obviously you want to stay away, hopefully everything stays away from injuries and things like that, but you become a better athlete. And there's no, especially at the highest level, there's no substitution to being athletic at that point.
Right. Well, I'm happy to hear that because I think I get the question a lot, do I need to give up all the other things I'm doing and just focus
Yep.
on one sport? And I try to tell
Yep.
kids play as many sports as long as you reasonably can, because of course
Yep.
there's money and there's time and
Yep.
at some point, and you obviously don't want to get so worn out that you get hurt. But I do believe I was a three-sport athlete in high
Yep.
school. Uh,
Yep.
I do believe that athleticism came partly from trying all those different things and having a you
For
know,
sure.
having to transition between them. And so happy to hear that. Okay. Um, and then in terms of some of the changes that have happened in recent years regarding in the recruiting world, we'll talk first about the transfer portal.
Yep.
I tell kids all the time, when you get a chance to talk to a college coach, ask about what is your philosophy around recruiting through the transfer portal, and understand that this might change over time, right? What
Yep.
they might not be what they think a year from now, but what do you,
Yeah.
but where did Duke come out on the transfer portal question?
Yeah. I could not imagine. I never ever thought we would be the transfer portal. I never ever thought till the transfer portal came. It was amazing that we would get, because we like to cultivate our athletes. We like to develop our players. We like to develop our players. We like to one group to come out, this other group to be ready to go into them. But I do remember one day we had three players in the same day come in and say, "Hey, Michelle Cooper comes in. I'm going pro. Ruthie Jones comes in and she goes, I'm going to med school. All great things. A goalkeeper, I'm going to med school. Sophie Jones comes in and I'm going to go pro. And we're 100% behind them, but all of a sudden you've got your core of your team, you know. So at that point it was like, what is this transfer portal? What is this thing you have to pull up and you go at this point? So it is something that I think is, and we've been, our team last year, we had a number of players that came in at mid-semester, two players that came in mid-semester, and two more players that spent their last COVID year, fifth year, with us. And both of them are in the NWSL right now, Hannah and Ella, and they just changed our program. They absolutely changed our program. They brought us athleticism. They brought us, we needed a flank player that could beat players on the dribble. We need a center midfielder that was great in tight spaces. We had another flank player that was strong and service balls. We had a really fast forward to stretch teams. And we just didn't have that in our program for some reasons overall. Unfortunately, we had to make some decision on our seniors that left. We invited them all to come back to Duke, and they were great. We wanted them back, but some of them we couldn't afford to give money to because we needed to give money towards players to make our team more athletic and to become where we scored last year we scored 67, sometimes crazy number of goals. The year before we scored 14 the whole year. So we needed obviously as coaches, you're like, we got to have we got to get attacking personalities and we got to get attacking mentality of players in here. So the transfer portal helped us get that type of players to us. We had a couple transfer people. It just wasn't a good fit. It didn't work out like everything else. And it's not easy. I think it's like speed dating. You don't really go through the process of dating like you do in a traditional recruiting, mom and dad and sister and brother and everybody through that. You got to make a quick decision, especially in mid-semester. If players want to come in January, it's, get to know you, what are you looking for? What do we have financially for you? Do you have an opportunity to play? And, then, do you match us academically and athletically? So it's definitely I think relates a lot to speed dating. It's quick and done, and sometimes they arrive on campus and that may be the first time they ever get on campus will be in January.
Right.
Sometimes they commit to you and then they make a trip on campus and stuff with it too. So it's an interesting concept out there. I don't think it's going to go away. I think the genie is out of the bottle. So there needs to be some guardrails on it. I think it has to have that. I think that's in the process of working. I don't know how it's all going to work, but I think there will be some, and there's been some modifications with it too. So I think it's a good suggestion that you guys talk to them about? Because I know a lot of coaches that prefer transfer portal kids to regular incoming freshmen.
Hmm.
Uh, I know a lot of coaches that I just rather deal with a player that's been through college. I'd rather deal with a little bit more mature player at this age with it too. It wasn't us. We liked a mixture of both,
Hmm.
and like the players to come, and probably leaning more on the incoming college player than the transfer portal.
Hmm.
But sometimes there's holes in your roster, and if you want to compete for national championships, that you need to feel on the transfer portal.
Right. Right. Well, and I found that was interesting when I was visiting this past fall, and I had a chance to speak with Kieran, and he was telling me that, and I'm sure many universities have done this, but Duke had created a 1-year master's
Oh,
in
yeah.
business program that was a short. I mean, normally you'd have a 2-year
Yeah.
program for an MBA, but they did a
Yeah.
1-year. I think it was marketing or something.
Yeah,
Um,
it's MMS. It's an MMS program.
right.
Yeah.
So just for that very purpose, is you've got these kids who have 1 year of eligibility left. They come in, they've already, they're considered a graduate student. And I'm sure many universities have had to modify their graduate programs for that very reason.
Yeah, and there's, in that program, there's somewhere about 70 athletes a year. We're not just talking about women's soccer players, of course. We're talking about ton. And most of them are Ivy League kids. Most of them, because of the rules of the Ivy League, of them not playing extra if they even got hurt or they have something after 4 years. A lot of them were Ivy League players. Like we had Hannah Bebar with us from Harvard at that point too. So it is. And then I think you will also continue to see it, because I think coming down the road is going to be 5 for 5, where athletes are going to get 5 years. I think that is coming very, very soon. I
Okay.
would not be shocked if it came next year, not this year, but the following year, where they have 5 years, and then so in a traditional 4-year program, and then also finding a master's program.
Okay.
And that's hard because a lot of schools don't have master's programs.
Right. Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
What if you don't have that to
yeah,
offer?
they don't. They don't. And not only Duke, but other schools have come up with new creative ways to have master's programs too.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and then my final question around sort of the recruiting and all the money, the NIL opportunities, and the House versus the NCAA settlement. Not to go into, you don't need to go, too crazy with this one, but like,
Yeah.
has that had an impact on? I mean, I know it hasn't had an impact on the Duke women's soccer program,
Yeah.
but what are your thoughts on kind of where that stands right now and how maybe the current coaching staff might be adjusting to those new realities?
Well, again, it is new realities of, and obviously having a son in basketball and high level basketball at Michigan, it's nothing like he goes through. It's thank goodness it's nothing like he goes through, but it is out there. And, I think some of the things is that you can, I think it's still where you can make decisions not to go down that road. You could still say, hey, that's not who we are. We're not going to go down that road, and still get a really quality young lady and a quality player in that. But I don't know how long that's going to last. And I think the current staff is preparing for both ways. You also know out there, and it's out there, if you recruit this young lady, they're going to want NIL money. They're going to want NIL money. Family's going to want NIL money. Advisors going to want NIL money. Or if you recruit this young lady, the education is going to be the big part, and that's going to be the driving thing. Still getting in the best school they possibly can get it, so you can get into. So there's some choices of which way you want to go, with that. And schools do have NIL money. They don't have a lot of NIL money, and there's been a number of players that have changed schools with some NIL money.
Mhm.
Uh, but it still hasn't really jumped in the fiber of women's soccer yet. But
Yeah.
if things stay the same with NIL and the house settlement, it's going to be interesting how it will change. The house settlement what will that affect the collectives? How much money at women's soccer, as we're talking about that particularly, how much money or Olympic sports will they get from this house settlement? Probably not a lot. 75, 80% is going to go to football, and 15% or 20% is going to go to basketball, and Women's basketball will get some, and there'll be a few sports. So, it's going to be interesting how all of that shakes out. And, I think, again, there's a lot of guardrails that need to be put on NIL, and there's a lot of people trying to work on that. But again, that's something that's out there. It's how do you roll that back in,
Mhm.
without completely blowing everything up and changing. So it's an exciting. As I was talking with Kieran as a young coach at 40, it's actually kind of an exciting time for him. Those things. As an old coach in the 60s, it's like, it's not as an exciting time with it at that point. But I do find it a little interesting. It's like we said earlier, you can't stay the same. Things change. I think it's great to see athletes do get paid some money. I just think it's got to come to. I think there's got to be some guardrails on how much you get paid, and the money that's being, especially in football and basketball, is being rolled out is just crazy. And it's the only sport, including all professional sport, it doesn't have a salary cap. And the growth in some of the sports from last year to this year has been astronomical.
Right.
It's crazy. So we'll see where that goes. That
Yeah.
one has to be
Yeah,
determined. To
for
be
sure.
determined lifestyle.
Okay, so I kind of want to just quickly talk about your coaching transition. We've talked a lot about Kieran Hall and Carla Overbeck, uh,
Yep.
but in terms of, at what points in your career did you find yourself learning or leaning the most on your assistant coaches, and how did those partnerships shape your program's success?
Yeah, no, I think it was, like I mentioned earlier, when Billy took the job at Georgia and there was an opening and I had a chance, I thought this is a chance to reshape our program at this point. Here's where we could either I could hire somebody I knew who would be very similar to me and, would just be doing the same thing, or B, I could hire somebody that was just somebody that was just outside the box thinker, somebody that was just really on the cutting edge of soccer and stuff with it too. So going along with that is, I think you also have to distinguish a little bit of your coaching thing,
Mhm.
because if you're hiring somebody to do a job, you want them to do the job. And it wouldn't be like, okay, if I'm hiring somebody to get trainings, to write up trainings, to come with training, and then all of a sudden they give me the trainings and I'm missing the point of trainings,
Right.
because there's emphasis about the coaching points. And this exercise, the coaching points are A, B, C, D. Coaching points are this. So it was a matter of, okay, am I ready to give up some of the coaching points in training and give up some of the activities and training to but once I did that, and once you got out there and you said, okay, you see the person work, you understand, you see your team getting better, you see it's the best for your program and stuff too. I think that's when it became a lot easier to do that than it was at that point. Now, if I was 35 years old, I couldn't do that. I would still have to, be, involved. But when I became 50 some at that point and been done it, for 30 years or so, it became easier when you saw your program progressing and growing at that point. I think that was it. If the people we didn't hire were not progressing the program or bringing new things and the program growing, then that would have been a mistake, and we would have had to adjust at that point.
Right.
So I think it's fortunate to hire two really good people, and I grew and Carla grew and we all grew together. And we all grew together, and it was fun. It was fun growing. It was fun learning about other things late in your career.
Right. Well, I can imagine why so much, I mean, of the emotion that I saw just being at I wasn't at the final retirement party, but I was certainly there for a few of those things. And you could just see that you guys have all been through, I mean, obviously your players that you feel so much for, but just your coaching staff.
Yeah,
You guys have all been together for quite a while. So
for sure.
that's nice to hear. Well, so I guess going back to just reflecting on your career, what do you have any stories about maybe some of the most difficult times in your career, and how you managed through it? Like, do you ever you're such a positive person, and everything I hear from you is so positive, but did you ever have one of those kind of heartbreaking or
Oh
difficult
yeah.
moments?
I think early in our career, again, establishing where we wanted the program to go and we always wanted to play, always wanted to be in the conversations for championships, ACC championships, NCAA championships, just championships. I wanted always to be consistent and be in the conversation, into really making that program, trying to get the program there on a
Mhm.
consistent basis. It was hard. It was not easy, and there was some dark days. I thought probably not as dark as because I'm the biggest critic out there. Probably not as dark as I really thought it was, but there were some dark days of getting the program to that level.
Mhm.
That we were going to be year in and year out. And there could be a few years here. There's a few years that we missed the NCAA tournament. Sometimes there was injury. Sometimes we didn't play well. Sometimes we didn't recruit well. Sometimes we didn't coach well. So it wasn't a one thing, but it's just getting the program to those things. And there was a lot of heartbreaking close losses with when we first came in the league. Some to Carolina, some to Virginia, some to the established program, and you're like, will we ever get there? And
Yeah.
you just got to get out of bed the next day and go back to work and roll up your sleeves and continue to work and believe. And it's not rocket science. It's just you got to put your heart into it, and you got to believe, and you got to just keep working hard. And and then the main thing was just kind of getting the right play, continue to get the right players that believe, had the same vision as you had, and had the same belief, and believed in Duke the way you did, and then that were able to perform in the classroom, and then obviously in the community, and then on the field too. So that
Right.
was
Okay. So my last question, what are you doing for fun in retirement now?
it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm playing a lot of pickleball. I love pickleball. My wife and I play a lot of pickleball. I'm playing a lot more soccer myself. I go pick up soccer in Wilmington
Okay.
every Sunday morning. We play small sided pickup soccer every Sunday morning. It's hard because it's a lot younger. I had my group in Raleigh, Durham, we played, but that was an over 60 and 70 league. And I was fast in that league. I'm not fast in this league. And then I actually have a game tonight. Every Wednesday night, I play in a seven-a-side over 40 league, which is very difficult. But I play in that every Wednesday night, so I do that. I've started playing a little golf again.
Nice.
But I sleep a little bit longer. Instead of 5:30, I get up at 7:30. I walk my dogs on the beach. Instead of 6:30, I walk them at 9:30, and I just do what I want to do. And I've visited a lot of family, a lot more family. Been able to some friends. I'm getting ready to go to Florida tomorrow. I think going to end up with one of my coaching buddies. Go down to see Saturday night. Go see Inter Miami and see Messi play.
Fun.
I've been able to watch a lot of Champions League.
Yeah.
At 3 o'clock, I've been able to watch my Barcelona team and playing and having a great year. Play where I used to just sneak in the looks on the practice field. I used to look at my phone to see how they were doing. Now I get to see whole games
Ooh.
um, from down in downstairs here. So yeah, it's been great. It's been fantastic. I do remiss some of the players and relationships and stuff, but it was time. I think retirement's great if you're ready. And I think at this stage, I was ready. I was ready to release that. And I think, as I mentioned a lot, as Kieran and Carla, I was also in such a good place that I released the program that I put my heart and soul in and worked for 24 years to them. And I know they're doing the same thing in the program. So that's made retirement a lot better on that end. I look forward to see them play. And we'll go down there some, but ACC Network is a great thing too.
Yeah.
You know, Sit here, be able to catch games on the ACC network too.
So you think you will go back and watch games next
Oh
fall?
yeah, oh, yeah, we'll go back and watch some, but we're still 3 hours away, so there still will be. I have to organize it going back and playing soccer with my boys in the morning, and then watching games in the afternoon. That'd be a pretty good day.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the time. I really, truly appreciate it. And hopefully the various, counselors and families who are watching this have learned something and had a chance to hear your, thoughts about so many different topics. So I really, truly appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.